Howdy, y'all. Welcome back to another episode of the Texas SignalCast. I'm your host, Joe Desotel, and I'm here with my co-host, Jessica Montoya Coggins. Hello, Jessica.
Hey guys.
We're here for another week to talk about what the legislature is up to. So they have got quite a calendar left. There's only about 2 weeks left until Sine Die, which is typically the last day of the legislative session. In a year like this, it seems like we'll probably have, at the very least, one special session, which is slated for the fall. We've talked about before with redistricting because of really the pandemic and a host of other delays. The legislature won't get the numbers that they need to redraw the lines until later. So that's going to happen. But we've also intermittently talked about the possibility of additional special sessions, one specifically that could be on federal stimulus money that might be coming, and essentially who gets to decide what happens. Now, the House voted unanimously, Democrats and Republicans, very rare thing, to essentially allow the legislature to decide what happens with that money. In the past, it was essentially the governor. And in this case, the House voted unanimously that it would be a legislative decision. And so, literally, in the last few hours, this kind of discussion has kind of blown up in the legislature, where the Senate Budget Committee was, looking at the House budget and essentially pulled that out. That unanimous support that the House had for the legislature deciding where the funds go was pulled out by the Senate. And essentially, Dan Patrick is calling the House's bluff on this and basically saying, look, if you want, just go ahead and vote against the budget. And many folks may not realize this, but the legislature meets only once every 2 years. And the only bill they're required to pass by the Constitution is the budget. So literally, this has the opportunity to blow up the entire process. And so the House right now is reacting very strongly to that decision by Dan Patrick. And essentially, they've called business off for the rest of the day, and they're decided they're not even coming back until Sunday. And the message there is essentially, if you want to pass more Senate bills, you need to start passing our House bills, because basically Dan Patrick has he's slowed down a lot of the business in the Senate, passing House bills, and then now having removed this important provision from the budget, he has really gotten a lot of House members, a lot of Republican House members, very upset. So Lyle Larson is one of the ones that have come out. Now, he's been vocally against Dan Patrick for a while now, but there are other members who are typically were part of the Freedom Caucus, like Representative Leach, who is a very conservative, younger Republican, who also basically said something to the effect of, there are two chambers or there are no chambers. That's what he tweeted. So essentially saying, if you don't treat us with respect, then we're not going to have any business get done in the legislature. So a lot of drama over the last, couple of days.
There has been, and thank you also for sort of the explanation on this. This is really my first time being in Texas with this process. So I really knew very little, even the pronunciation of sine die. It was up to me. I would have pronounced that in a like in a choral way, like sine die, something like weird. So no, this is very as you were saying, pretty dramatic. In most workplaces, if people say, you know what, you're not respecting us, we're not going to show up for over 48 hours, that's quite a statement. And so that seems to be what is occurring here.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll follow that very closely and see what's happening. It's definitely going to have some effect on some of the priority bills that both Dan Patrick and the governor have announced. And, this is sort of becomes the victim of time. And this is why there's always a big push to get your bills out and passed as soon as you can, because you never know what's going to happen towards the end of the session. And so many times, bills, even good bills, even popular bills, will essentially be collateral damage to some partisan or political play, where bills just start dying, on the vine, because they don't get past the finish line, or somebody's chubbing, essentially filibustering one bill that they really don't like, till the end of a calendar day, and then everything behind it that just just happens to be behind that bill dies. And so we're getting into that phase where like every single day is extremely critical. And so I think this does send a strong signal to the Senate that the House is ready to play ball, as it were. And it's pretty upsetting that the bills that they can agree on are things like SB 8, which we saw that the governor passed, or the governor signed today officially. And then, of course, had this giant, you say it wasn't a press conference because the press wasn't invited, but they definitely took pictures and they posted it all over social media. So it wasn't a secret. It wasn't something they were hiding. They are very proud of it. And I'm watching, all over Twitter, all these members just, pat themselves on the back for essentially banning abortion after 6 weeks.
Right. This was a huge priority for them. It's actually, I think, it is one of the strictest anti-abortion bills really on the books in the entire country. We had an op-ed that was sent to us from Avow, Texas, their political director, Caroline, and she really highlighted again just how extreme this bill is. We've kind of gone into a little bit, in addition to sort of banning abortions essentially before most women even know they are pregnant. This also sort of opens up a legal minefield in terms of people being able to sue providers, being able to sue someone who is accused of aiding or abetting an abortion. So Caroline, really kind of spelled that out. You could have a nosy neighbor who, they might suspect someone of obtaining an abortion, and that would implicate a rideshare driver. It just sort of opens up a lot of ramifications, a lot of ugly things.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, this is where we look headed. Now, it is important to note that this bill does not take effect until September 1st. So as of right now, abortion is still legal in Texas, and we are probably anticipating some court challenges to this law. But at the same time, we are facing a Supreme Court
Yeah.
that is 6-3 conservative. And they actually also just this week announced they would be taking up a case that could potentially really erode Roe v. Wade.
Right.
So this is
Yes. And
this
that
is
would be a,
interesting.
a, a Mississippi bill. And I believe that was a 12-week bill.
I think it's a 15 week.
Okay.
But that's, it is that is also still, that would be the earliest ban. And that wouldn't be, I believe, decided until June, but that is kind of on the horizon here.
Yeah.
And
So theoretically, I know it's a conservative court, but theoretically, if they struck down the Mississippi bill, that would also strike down the Texas bill. I mean, if you can't ban it at 15 weeks, you certainly can't ban it at 6. At least how I understand this.
yeah, I think that people are sort of parsing out why, if you do just believe in the precedence of Roe v. Wade, would you even take the Mississippi bill?
Yeah.
So that's kind of what's prompting
Yeah.
things. But it is important to note that for the moment, abortion is still legal in Texas, and that there are a lot of organizations that really could use our support. We've talked in the past with folks like from Lilith Fund, from TEA Access Fund, Jane's Due Process, Frontera Fund. These are all really, really good organizations. They've been on the front lines here, and they're going to continue to be on the front lines.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw that a whole list of organizations. It was the ACLU, but they basically were listing all similar types of organizations that you named as well, that were saying we're all in this together and we'll continue to fight and essentially see you in court. Right. And so Abbott, who of course signed that bill and was very proud of it, he also made a couple other announcements that had him trending on Twitter this week for things that just don't really seem to take in account science or public health. In one case, it was banning the local governments and things like that from implementing mask mandates in, schools, counties, cities, things like that. And this is, of course, after the CDC has already said if you're fully vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask. So to me, this is somewhat of just like a insult to injury kind of a thing. I don't know what, there are still cities that have mask mandates, say to like inner city buildings or county buildings and things like that. And this would essentially remove those mandates. And some schools might, out there, because they're all independent, they have their own rules. Well, now they're not so much, at least when it comes to mask mandates for
This is, I think,
schools.
very, very dangerous too. The vaccines have only been available for children for not that long. I had a friend of mine who just yesterday was taking one of his kids to get the first shot, and it was about an hour and a half wait. And obviously it's great. That I'm very glad that there were so many people that were doing that. But this is sort of a process that has been unfolding. So for schools, which we absolutely want our schools to be in session, you're basically saying to a teacher or any sort of person who's on that school property, like, we can't sort of guarantee that all these kids are going to be vaccinated. And we're also not going to guarantee that there's any mask wearing. So again, this is very sort of incomprehensible, in my
Yeah.
opinion, and just cruel, and also just it's very indicative of Abbott. He wants Texans to make these important health decisions regarding masks, but for women who need an abortion, no.
Right. And he literally said as much. He said Texans should make their own decisions when it comes to healthcare, is almost a direct quote in what he said. And then the next day he signs this restrictive abortion bill. Yeah. And so the other major announcement that he made was essentially that he was ending the federal unemployment boost that was coming, the extra $300 a week. And, this is pretty insidious. I think he tried to cite the fact that there's a lot of jobs available and open as a reason why that you should remove it. But that doesn't really matter, because if I mean, I could post online right now. I got a couple of jobs. You want to come like clean like my room? You want to come like wash my car? I'll pay you, $2 or whatever. That's not a real job. What we're seeing right now for the first time in a very long time are wages increasing, because so many people, yeah, there were jobs available. There were very low wage jobs. People are still concerned about their health and being out there. And so they don't want to risk their health for 725 minimum wage job. And so you saw, signs like from companies like McDonald's and some of these larger companies raise their wages to $10 and $15 plus a bonus to come and work. That's how it's supposed to work. And so this is kind of one of the first times we're really seeing, interestingly, since the strong labor movement, not even intentionally, but in some ways, a unintentional collective bargaining of workers basically deciding that their health and well-being is worth more than the current minimum wage. And so that federal boost, you know, is to take that away is essentially punishing people to because they see that their sort of grip and power over people to keep them in low wage jobs and positions, they're losing that now. They're losing that argument. Companies are having to raise their wages, and so it seems like they're trying to do anything they can to sort of stop that sort of, you know.
Right. Yeah. So we got I'm on the governor's mailing list, which is always a wonderful joy. So yes, right when I received this, it kind of raised a huge flag for me. But this is sort of what many red state governors have been doing, and I believe it was Julian Castro who pointed out, there's still a million Texans that were going to be receiving this 300
Mhm.
weekly unemployment insurance, and the way Abbott is sort of putting this, he is sort of, again, blaming Texans and sort of creating that false argument that, if you can't find a job right now, you're lazy, kind of
Mm-hmm.
entitled, that whole thing. So yeah, no, it is very, for a state that, claims to be pro-life, they really do a lot of things that hurt Texans, that are very anti-family, actually, when you think about it.
Very much so. And in order to even qualify for unemployment in Texas, you have to be looking for a job. So it's not like these people aren't looking for work. If they're receiving the unemployment benefits, then they are looking for work. Um, and so, yeah, but people have other considerations. If you go work an $8 an hour job and you have to leave your kid at home, their childcare may cost more than what you even earn at your job. And so these are decisions, like you said, these are family-based decisions that people have to make, and they're putting people in a very difficult position. And this is really seems like always very politically calculated. And we're seeing now is sort of the season where announcements are being made, people looking at challenges. The governor now has at least two challengers. We've talked about that in the last podcast. We're going to continue to monitor as people jump into the race, but it certainly seems to be having an effect on folks and the decisions that they're making, and they're playing to this very, very, very small base of voters. And so when you look at the polls that are being done in Texas and these decisions that these leaders are making, and when they don't add up to what the polls suggest Texans want, you really got to start asking, well, why is that? And it's because right now they don't feel they have to cater to most Texans. They only have to cater to the very small percentage of Republican base voters that will decide. And these are the same people who put Allen West in charge of their party. These are the people that continue to be like Sid Miller and indicted Attorney General Ken Paxton. So they're not sending their best when it comes to, their voters and the policies that they're trying to implement here. And so we saw a couple, I think we might have mentioned on the last podcast that George P. Bush was looking at jumping into this race against Ken Paxton. Now, Ken Paxton has responded and essentially said that George Bush is terrible at his current job and is only interested in running against him because he doesn't have as much money as Greg Abbott, which nobody has as much money as Greg Abbott. Greg Abbott has like $30 million in the bank. So, there could be some truth to that, but it also doesn't mean there are other truths to it. Like Paxton is terrible at his job and he's quite vulnerable, as we saw. Paxton was won by the thinnest margin of any statewide Republican. And we have at least one, what I believe is a very strong candidate, and Joe Jaworski, who has already announced and has been on tour running around the state for months now. Well, you talked to him once already. So I think it'd be good to have him come back on and get his perspective on the Republican primary and see what he thinks about that and what he's been hearing out
Yeah,
on
I have,
his
I have a lot
tour.
of questions about Paxton that I've been wanting to ask him. I have like this running tally of like the Paxton Patrol. But yeah,
Mhm.
and it is funny, like his comment about, the only reason George P. Bush is running against me is because I haven't raised as much money as Greg Abbott. That's kind of a cell phone there. I don't realize
Right. Yeah.
kind of figured that out, but
No, I don't think so either. I mean, but you know, um, yeah, it'll be interesting to see like how this kind of all shakes out because we know that Sid Miller also has ambitions. You know, it looks like he was leaning more towards Dan Patrick, and then we saw Trump endorse Dan Patrick, and that seemed to be kind of a signal to Sid Miller to stay out of that race. And but we'll see. He's a cowboy. I don't think he's
we
going to let
we will
anybody
see.
swing.
I mean, in that New York Times, we talked about the New York Times article about him, that he had some sort of choice things to say about Abbott, and insinuated that Abbott is not a huge fan of Trump, which I don't know if he was necessarily saying that to the reporter. I think there's someone out there in Florida that was more geared to. So it's possible that we might get some announcements, but no, I we will see what that entails for George P. As he challenges
And
indicted Attorney General.
and actually, Sid Miller is sort of in some legal hot trouble right now. At least, certainly not good news for him. One of his top aides is under investigation. I think he's already been arrested, and essentially for some scheme where he was essentially being bribed for hemp licenses. And so, Sid Miller being the agricultural commissioner, his office oversees the distribution of these types of licenses. So, it'll be interesting to see how that all shakes out.
Yes. I don't know what it is. I've always been allergic to hemp, and for some reason, even when you said hemp, I had
I
to sneeze
saw
for a
that.
second. So
I saw that.
it's like something Pavlovian. But yes. So, and that advisor has actually been with Miller for quite a while. So if he does embark upon this challenger route, he will be without that individual who was arrested.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. So back to sort of Dan Patrick. It's interesting because we talk about sort of the perception of how all this looks, and Republicans, when we talked about the voter suppression bills, they fought every single time, and they were just so insulted that anybody would insinuate that it had anything to do with race, or that there was any unfair advantage that might be targeting Democrats or Democratic voters or Democrats that happen to be of color. And and then we see these kinds of photos like with SB8, and it's literally, it's almost like I wonder if they see it or not, at the time. Now, looking at the picture, and it's just literally, it's about 50, 60 people, maybe more. And I think the only person of color in that whole group was Eddie Lucio, the second, Senator Lucio, who is a very well-known, a long time, staunch Catholic conservative Democrat from South Texas. But he was literally the only person that I can identify in that photo, and it just goes on and on. So when Dan Patrick appointed the conference committees for those bills, the SB7, HB6 voter suppression bills, there wasn't a single person of color on the conference committee. And I saw even Republicans on Twitter say, "Man, this is a bad look." You get all this criticism that like you're targeting people by race on these bills, and then you go to the conference committee and you can't find a single Democrat or person of color to like be a part of this discussion. But it's up to Dan Patrick. He gets to decide, and appoint who's on these committees.
If they don't realize that they're being exclusionary, that's bad. But if they do realize and they don't care, that's also very bad and possibly even worse. So
Yeah.
it's one of those scenarios. But I mean, I think that we kind of noticed this, I think, around the country. The Republican Party is just a bit on the homogenous side, and
Yeah.
it is when you have like these actual photographs, it becomes pretty stark. I think we saw this in the debate about HB6, where initially when Briscoe Cain was presenting this, it was like very, very white and male, and then they did try and sort of position some
Some women.
Republicans,
Yeah, women. Yeah, around him in the background. Yeah. So, it does seem like every now and then they understand optics, and they understand it. They certainly understand messaging really well. But man, I guess they just can't help themselves when it comes to these photo ops, and they just meme themselves over and over again. And this has come up over and over. And I think one of the more stark examples was in 2008, the class of 2018 in Congress, when the new class of Republicans came in, and then you put that side by side to the 2018 class of Democrats, and they look like America. There's a good number of white men in that Democratic class, but there's also women of color and white women, and Hispanics, and just everything. And it wasn't like a parliamentary system where Democrats like said, "Okay, we need 5 black people and we need 10 Hispanic people." This is just, these people ran in their respective districts, were voted in by their voters and from their home states. And it's just that we have a party that looks like America does, and they don't, which is again why they're so obsessed with controlling who has access to the polls, how and when, and for how long. And so we're going to continue to see, this type of stuff and more unpopular legislation the longer they fight to hold on to power.
Yeah, and I'll be curious to see what the corporate response will be to this. We didn't see that much from Senate Bill 8, just which was a little disappointing. But we
Right.
do know that several organizations, several corporations, American Airlines, um, and Dell had really spoken out forcefully against the voter suppression legislation. So I
Hmm.
think we'll probably expect to see that ramp up. And then, some of the anti-trans bills, we had seen the NCAA weigh in
Right.
on the bill that would impact trans athletes.
Hmm.
So that also seems to incense Republicans. And if they do sort of go down this pathway, I think that will manifest even further.
Yeah, and this latest dust up between the House and the Senate actually could revive some of these bills, right? Because if they go to a special session, the governor can add whatever bills he wants to that special session. So if they die during the regular session and we end up having to go to a special, he can add to the call any of these bills, the trans athlete bills, all of the bills that we fought so hard to kill or to delay until they died, um, could get a second life. And so I know you've used that analogy all the time. They're never dead. They're never really
They're never
dead.
dead. It's like the Freddy
Yeah.
Freddy Krueger rule, the Michael Myers rule. They're never dead. They always come
No.
back.
No. No. And every time we think we're getting away, we trip on a rock or stick and we fall, and they have just enough time to catch up to us, and then we have to like crawl away and just try to get away as fast as we can. So that's kind of where we're at in this session. We want better government. We want our representatives to listen to voters and do what's right. But a lot of times in Texas, we're in more threat when the legislature is in town than when they aren't, and they've consistently found ways to raise the bar when it comes to just terrible legislation and targeting people, and they do it so methodically. And with like this abortion bills, every year they come back and they push a little bit further and a little bit further, and this is calculated, because and you'll hear some of the most extreme, like the on the what they call pro-life side, will say, you know we don't even like that 6-week bill because we need to ban abortion altogether. No one should ever be. And then the architects of the bill try to whisper as quietly as possible, like, we're on your side, this is just how we have to do this, we have to do it incrementally. And so that they have these court challenges and they can just continue to chip away until there is nothing left. And so that is, one of the handful of things that are going on right now. And you actually did a story on the fact that the legislature voted down even studying Medicaid expansion.
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
So this was a bill or a committee that was studying some of these public programs for the state. And Ann Johnson had an amendment to that to also study Medicaid expansion. Julie Johnson also spoke in favor of this. Everyone in our story has the last name Johnson, so I apologize on this. But yes, so the amendment from Ann Johnson was voted down, and I mean, I encourage folks. We've posted the story on our Twitter, and we included some video that Ann had from the floor, and it was very powerful, and it was speaking about the fact that you're not even going to study what potential impact this has. And Nathan Johnson, again, another Johnson, the senator who introduced the bill that would have expanded Medicaid in the Senate, I mean, he has really studied this. He has several videos on YouTube showing, 1 million Texans would get health care. We would have 250 million federal funds for this. So it's one of those baffling things that,
Yeah.
not only are we simply not passing Medicaid expansion, but we're not even going to study what that impact could be.
I mean, exactly. And this is such a weak sauce because a study in the legislature is already kicking the can down the road. Studying in the legislature is essentially saying, yeah, we're not going to pass that, but yeah, we'll give you something. This is an important issue. And the worst part about it is it's purely political because it's already our money. This is federal money that's been allocated to Texas. We're just simply saying we're not going to take it. And it's the same thing with the unemployment money that was coming from the federal government that Abbott just said, nope, we're not going to take it. This is money that is our money that's already been allocated to Texas, and we simply will not take it.
We won't
And
take it, even though Texas leads the country in the number of uninsured. And that number, I think, has gone a lot higher in the
yeah,
last year, especially with the pandemic. But we also lead the country in the number of uninsured children.
hmm
So, Julie Johnson, when she was speaking in favor of the amendment, that's what she cited. And she actually said, shame on, all of you Republicans who consider yourself, quote unquote, pro life. The fact
sure.
that you're not even doing this really speaks to that being she did not use this language, but BS.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it is. And I'm really disappointed because I would be disappointed in a study because like you said, we don't need to study it anymore. It's actually
we
really
know,
silly.
yeah, we actually know
We
a lot of
know.
economists have studied this. Actually,
Yeah.
they've done. Their studies exist. We look at one from the GW Public Policy. It's a great place.
hmm
They did it. It's
hmm
1 million Texans, federal, like 250 federal funds.
Yeah.
Um, all the chambers of commerce, not exactly bastions of liberalism. They all want this because they know just how much
Well,
it
it's
would benefit.
good. Yeah, healthy Texans are more likely to be working Texans, more likely to be spending money and have the money to spend on, going out and just being a consumer versus paying debt on healthcare. And and not only that, but beyond this actual studies that these think tanks are doing, we have other states, and that's the whole point of the 50 state system is to be able to look and see what other states are doing. Is it working for them? Has and it clearly is. We lead the nation in the uninsured because we refuse to insure them and take that money and give them access to healthcare and the services they need. And it has a long tail of effects, beyond just simply not having access to. I mean, I'll give you like this is just me sort of being lazy because I was fortunate enough to have health insurance, but we kind of had this conversation last week, but I went, to the dentist after a long time and got my tooth worked on. Then the pandemic hit, and so during the whole pandemic, I hemmed and hawed and didn't go to the dentist, and because a lot of dentists weren't seeing people, and then whatever. I didn't need any additional barriers to not go to the doctor, but I had a couple, and so that went from just a simple fix my cavity to a tooth extraction, and like it's fine. I had health insurance. I could do it. It was more painful. It's more inconvenient. Like I missed out on some other things I wanted to do, but that's okay for me. But for, hundreds of thousands of other Texas families, those things can escalate beyond a tooth extraction. Or if somebody misses a day at work, I work from home, no big deal. But if you don't and you miss a day or two of work and you're paid hourly, those kinds of things can have huge ramifications. And then, especially if it turns into debt and you can't afford it. And so we're just trapping people in debt in this horrible cycle, which there's a solution for, which is the saddest part. We have some of the best medical institutions in the entire country,
Mhm.
and we don't have access for our own residents to those services.
This is also why Texas is one of the highest rates of maternal mortality rates, not just in the country, but in the entire world. I
hmm
mean, that's again to someone who
World.
considers himself pro-life, you would think that you would not be okay with that.
Yeah, exactly.
On that
So
cheerful note.
yeah, yeah, I know. Well, we do have some good news actually happened today. The ACL lineup dropped,
Oh yeah.
and I don't know if you've ever gone to ACL, but it's kind of a big deal. Um,
I hear it's a big deal. I looked at the lineup. It looks really great. I mean, I was like, Megan Thee Stallion, John Batiste,
Yeah.
St. Vincent.
Yeah. George Strait,
Yeah, it
Billie
was.
Eilish,
Oh yeah.
Erica Badu, who's obviously
Oh yeah,
a
yeah. Dallas.
Dallasite.
Dallas,
Yeah.
yeah.
My in-laws live like 3 or 4 houses down from her, actually. Stevie Nicks, Molly Cyrus, Black Pumas, which, this is a Texas podcast. We got some Texas, really great other Texas artists also. So, yeah, there's some good stuff. I think a lot of people are just really looking forward to sort of going back to somewhat of normalcy and fighting over standing in line, fighting for ACL tickets is definitely a sign of heading back to normal. And even though it's way in October, just the thought of it and just like the announcement and having that whole, after it was canceled last year and all that is really, I think, giving people a lot of good feelings that they really miss, and I've talked to tons of people who really miss live music and going out and being amongst other people. And I have been to several ACL festivals. Definitely don't go every year. My wife actually goes consistently every year. I'm just the designated driver, so I'll pick her up and drop her off. But she goes with her cousin, so it's not like I'm dropping her by herself. But anyways, so I don't know, but I
Yeah,
love
I think
the
things are coming back. A lot of the things that we
yeah,
enjoyed in the
it's a
past.
nice it was nice to see that and see the usual, people, basically saying how, oh, this lineup sucks. That's something that's pretty perennial as well. Like, it doesn't matter. I think people have those posts like ready 2 days before it drops. But yeah, no, this is a good sign that things are coming back, and that gives us another 3 or 4 months for everybody to get vaccinated, and hopefully by then, if we haven't reached herd immunity, that we are, very close to that point, and people are still, taking the proper precautions. And
Yeah,
so,
yeah. I am excited for sort of return to things. I'm running in a race this weekend. It'll probably be pretty rainy and muddy, but at least we'll be out there, and it'll be back to doing that stuff.
yeah, what kind of race is it?
So this is a half marathon. So
Oof, that's a long way.
so well, I think that the course has changed a little bit just because again,
Is it
it's
in
rained a lot.
is
It's
it in
rained a lot.
Dallas?
It's in Irving,
Irving.
Texas.
Okay. Is it in like a urban setting? Like you say it's gonna
Yeah,
be
and
muddy maybe?
yeah, so it's like the Toyota Music, like Las Colinas. They have this sort of
Oh,
race.
okay.
So initially, I had signed up for a race in March of 2020. So it's sort of
Oh.
postponed from that.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah,
Well,
there's a lot coming back. I think I've decided that Space Jam 2 will probably be my first movie back in
nice.
theaters. So
Good for you. Have you been training though? Or are you just, I mean, a year and a
oh
half is a long
yeah,
time. Yeah, you've been
yeah,
training
yeah,
for that.
yeah. So,
I did a half marathon with my dad once, and it was absolutely awful, and I did not train. I probably like went out the night before, and
oh,
it's just like it was awful. I thought I was gonna die. I was just like, I just by the end, I was just one step at a time, just like, at no point for
was
any
this something you did in your early 20s? Because I feel like that could only be something someone.
Yes, yeah, yeah. Oh, it was probably late 20s actually. I'm a late bloomer, but yeah, and my dad had his sort of fitness, that time where he was just running and riding his bike all the time. So I kind of would join in with him a little bit. But anyways, no, I'm totally over that. I have a rowing machine. I will shoot basketballs around my neighborhood. So I try to do what I can in this new pandemic lifestyle to stay active and healthy, but I don't
But
see myself doing any half marathons anytime soon.
yeah, but I mean, these are the things that are returning at least.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, absolutely.
So get your
Well,
tickets to ACL, even if you want to moan about the performers.
yeah, yeah. I'll let folks do that. I will probably make one day. If I could pick any day, it'd probably be the George Strait. I think he was the first concert I ever went to actually with my mom.
Oh,
And so there's some other cool bands on here, but this is a lot of Gen Z stuff. Like I don't recognize. I'll just say straight out, I don't recognize a lot of these bands. There's some stuff I recognize, but I'm just assuming a lot of this is just like TikTok artists
Yeah.
and stuff. So I don't know.
Yeah, I took a look at the lineup and I was like, oh, I recognize about like 20% of this.
Yeah. Well, part of it is they like to have the up and coming artists too. So, well, cool. Well, that's all I have.
Yeah, same. So yeah, folks, if you haven't gotten vaccinated, go do that. You can go to concerts,
Hmm.
you can run, you can go to theaters and all sorts of fun stuff.
Yeah, there are a lot of perks to being vaccinated right now. So yeah, make sure that you get vaccinated, and make sure that you are following us on Twitter and you're checking the texassignal.com at least a few times a week to see what's going on in this great state of Texas. We certainly appreciate you listening. We appreciate our patrons. You can go to texassignal.com and check out the join Patreon and help to sustain this type of progressive journalism. We certainly appreciate it. It definitely matters. You even get a really cool little swag bag. I wear my t-shirt all the time because
It's
this
very
that's
comfortable.
super soft cotton. Yeah, absolutely love it. Comes with some stickers and some other fun stuff to show how you support progressive journalism in the state. So stay tuned with us, and until next time, later, y'all.
Bye guys.